Hey hippies, welcome and welcome back. It's Courtney Shavante if you are new here, and today we are back with another banging resin tutorial. This one's going to be for my all natural afro tray, and I'm super excited about this one. So if you're ready to get started and see how I style it, make sure you do hit that subscribe button, also hit the notification bell so that way you don't miss anything that I do put out moving forward. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. First, you do want to make sure that you have your mold on an even surface. I have mine on my leveling board to make sure that I don't have any issues as far as the resin not being level. You want to make sure it's cleaned out, and I prepped out 20 milliliters of resin, and I'm adding that to the rim. I'm adding about pretty much most of it. You can add in half, so that way you can add in the other half after you add in your decor. Now, to decorate this rim, we are going to be adding in some of these beads. So I'm going to thin this out using my heat gun so I can make sure that, bubbles don't get caught up in there. And I'm also going through with a toothpick just to make sure I help release any, encourage them to all like kind of come out and float to the surface. So that's the purpose of that. Just kind of get in there how you can. These are the beads that I'm using. They are on a strand and they are in a silver color. They are super bendable and easy to place in the perfect size. So I just kind of go through and I guide it using that same toothpick that I was using to kind of pop the bubbles with. I'm adding a little bit at a time into the rim, making sure that it's actually going into the rim and it's not pulling and is just being placed where I want it to be placed. So that way I have the amount of pearls that I do actually need. So I stopped to grab some scissors because I didn't have them handy, and I just kind of clipped exactly where it ended and where the beads met, and I'm pushing it down. This is the part where you want to go in and add a little bit more resin if necessary to the rim, but if not, you're just going to go ahead and start adding some drops down onto the surface of your tray. We're going to be doing the raindrop effect, and we're not going to be using any UV resin, so that's kind of what makes this tutorial a little bit different too. But you just kind of want to go through with your mixing stick and place the little droplets down so that way they're kind of randomized throughout. You want some big ones and you also want some small ones. Do take your time with this. You don't have to worry too much about the resin curing on you, especially since these are like little droplets and everything, but still move fast enough so that way your resin doesn't like flash cure inside your cup or anything like that. I do have this sped up pretty fast, but this process right here took me about maybe 7 to 8 minutes or so. But I'm just making sure that I have these like kind of little drops randomized, and then once I have it how I want it, I'm just gonna let this sit and allow this to cure. Now that everything has had a chance to cure, we're going to take our chameleon powder here and also just a regular paintbrush, and we're just going to brush this chameleon powder on directly onto the surface of the mold. You also want to go over the little resin droplets and everything that you did in the previous step, so that way it kind of creates a nice even background on everything. So do make sure that you are getting the chameleon powder over those droplets. What I'm doing here is I'm just kind of going through. I'm also paying attention to the parts where the etchings are as well, because I do want to make sure that I'm getting the chameleon powder into all the like little nooks and crannies and stuff. Now, this mold is available on my website, craftingwithcs.com. That's where you're always going to find the best prices on all of my luxury crafting supplies. So do make sure you check that out. I have this mold along with so many others, and I'm sure that if you like this one, you're going to absolutely love my website. So do make sure you check that out. Again, that's craftingwithcs.com. So just go ahead and continue on with the chameleon powder, and then you're ready for the very next step. You're going to prep about 90 milliliters of resin, and I'm going to be turning this a black opaque color. What I'm going to be using to do that is starting with some mica powder. I'm adding in a good bit of mica powder so that way I can make sure that the full amount of resin that I have in the cup is going to be colored. I do have about 100 milliliters in here currently, but I'm only going to be using 90 to put into the actual mold. So that's why you see the cup actually filled. So after mixing in that mica powder in really well, I'm taking in some alcohol ink and I'm pouring that in too. Keep in mind you never want to use more than 10% colorants to the amount of resin that you are using. If you do go in excess of that, then you run the risk of your resin not curing properly. And I know after putting in all this work, you definitely don't want that to happen. So just be mindful of the amount of colorants you are using. So I'm going to start by pouring about half of the resin directly into my mold here, and the reason I'm pouring half is because I don't want it to overflow when I come in with my heat gun here. I'm using my heat gun to push and manipulate this resin around and thin it out so that way I can make sure it's getting caught in those etchings and no bubbles get trapped or anything like that. And then I'm coming in with that remaining resin to go ahead and fill my mold, spray some alcohol if necessary, and then let that cure. Now that everything is cured, it's time for the fun part. You want to go ahead and wiggle this right from your mold. Remember to always bend the mold, never your resin, and it does come out very cleanly and very nicely. I hardly have any like spillage or anything to pull off or sand. So I'm going to take my acrylic paint here. I'm using a white color and I'm just going to brush that paint right into my etchings here. I'm not worried about them being perfect or anything like that because we are going to be cleaning this up in the very next step after this gets a chance to dry. But what I am doing is making sure that I push this paint directly into these etchings and making sure there aren't any gaps or anything like that, because if there are gaps then it will show in the aftermath after we finish the cleanup, and you do want to make sure you have crisp lines and make sure that your etchings show. So just be mindful of that when you are painting. I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up so we can wrap this part up, and once we finish getting this painted, we're just going to allow this paint to completely dry for us, hippies. The paint has dried and it's super quick drying because it is acrylic paint. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking my damp rag here and I'm going to go over this, and as you can see, the paint comes off of these smooth surfaces super easily. I'm going through really well and getting all the paint off that I don't want on there that's not trapped within those etchings, but you do want to make sure that you don't wipe too hard where the etchings are and pull the paint out or anything like that, so you don't need too much pressure or anything like that. Just make sure that you are going through and getting all the paint out of the cracks like you see me doing here. I zoomed in so that way you can kind of see what I was doing there, but you just want to make sure that you're getting inside all those little nooks and crannies, making sure that there's not any acrylic paint hiding there. Feel free to use your nails, or if you don't have nails, you can use a toothpick or something of that nature just to kind of help scratch it out. After I do a main wipe through, I kind of go through with the cleaner edge of my towel to get any like leftover residue paint and kind of completely clear that up. As soon as I'm done with getting the paint removed, I went ahead and prepped about 20 milliliters of resin. I'm just going to pour that directly into my tray here, and I'm using my mix stick to push this around and spread it evenly over the surfaces. I'm also using like the edges of the mix stick to kind of manipulate the resin into the lines of the etchings, just to help make sure that no bubbles have a chance to form or anything like that, so that way they don't kind of mess up the final piece. This doming coat is going to be our final layer, so do be mindful of the detail that you are pouring into this particular layer, because you don't want any bubbles to start coming up to mess up the final look of your piece. Get in there with the heat gun as well to thin that resin out and further even it out, making sure there aren't any dimples, and then you're going to allow some time for this to cure. Ta-da! This right here is our final project, hippies, and she is an absolutely gorgeous tray. Like, look at this color shift. She is out here giving SWV. Rain down on me. Y'all feel the vibes. Like, I love how this raindrop effect looks on this particular tray. I feel like it really matches the aesthetic. Like, this is like a little side view, so that way you can see how those pearls layer on top of that black, and it just looks really beautiful and amazing from the side as well. Like, I love that the opaqueness is so rich in that blackness, and it just creates a beautiful backing for this chameleon powder as well, so that way it just really shifts in the sunlight. You switch it around and everything, and it goes from like this purple to that greenish and that golden color, and it's so beautiful. The white etchings, I feel like, really complements this perfectly too, especially with the silver pearls. Like, what do you guys think? Make sure that you leave me your thoughts in the comments below. You know, I absolutely love hearing from you, hippies, and I can't wait to hear what you got to say. I've been getting a lot of great feedback on this tray, so of course I had to come through with the video for you guys with the quickness. But yeah, hippies, that's pretty much it for our tutorial here. I just want to show her off a bit. Bam, bam, bam. All right, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for your support. Mwah. XO.